Namaskar. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Ladies and gentlemen, students and scholars, teachers, trainers, professionals, listener, learners, the most honorable present Professor Modi, respected doctors and directors, honorable ministers and managers, honorable advocates, organizers, administrators and advisors, Dr. RK Singh from USA, heartily cordially welcome. It's really nice time, nice place, nice section today that we are appreciating English literature, the age of Elizabeth. Everyone who is a student of English literature has heard that Shakespeare is known as the founder of dramas, who born in 1564. Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj born in 1469, and our India was discovered by Vasco da Gama in 1498. East India Company established its business. It came in India in 1600. These are the important historical dates that make us able to remember and recollect the time of or the beginning of the Dark Age. Why it was dark? Because there was the full freedom of using independency, freedom, press was free to write anything. Inventive and innovative changes started to come at this time. So according to spirituality, it was the dark age, but scientifically it was the Guruji born in the form of light in the dark. So how was this time? What changes the writings of literature came at that time? Let us go through the mirror of our society or mirror of history. One who reads a few of Shakespeare's great plays and then the meager story of his life is generally filled with a vague wonder. Here is an unknown country boy who were and poorly educated according to the standards of his age. A very great man, freedom fighter, free thinker, starter, beginner, initiator, creator, generator, operator, who came and born in the different situations, but it was not counted initially. Later on, when he became the resourceful person and all relevancies, connectivities, relativities, people started to know. So likely that it happens with William Shakespeare, who arrives at the great city of London and goes to work at odd jobs in a theatre. In a year or two, he is associated with scholars and dramatists, the masters of their age, writing plays of kings and clowns, of gentlemen and heroes and noble women, all of whose lives he seems to know by intimate association. In a few years more, he leads all that brilliant group of poets and dramatists who have given undying glory to the age of Elizabeth. Dear scholars of the literature know this thing that this Elizabethan age was really remarkable, and any person can be defined in one word, because oneness, equality, unity has the power to define the indescriptive thoughts, inexpressible thoughts, ideas, words. All the researchers, those who are busy doing research in the Indian and international universities, they select this topic of research within 2 or 3, 2 to 3 words they use in the form of title for their complete thesis or dissertation. 2 to 3 words help us, help our, help our mind in recording, storing the great source of information. Likely that William Shakespeare, Shake means a person who shook the world, who had shaken the world by his writings. And in English literature, very important poems he wrote like Let Me Do, Let Me Not Do the Marriage with Few Hearts, Let Me Do the Marriage with Few Hearts, Let Me Not Do the Marriage with Few Minds. Such kind of thoughts and ideas expresses his great child. How shall I compare thee? And monuments. Such ideas and thoughts help us in understanding the literature of the world. Not only literature, but philosophically, scientifically, psychologically, even medically, his views, thoughts are proved true. He analyzed, observed what is the true meaning of life, what is the true meaning of marriage, what is the true meaning of love. He very closely expressed his thoughts, very closely examined, observed, and then he expressed. Play and play after play run from his pen, mighty drama of human life, and character following one another so rapidly that good work seems impossible. Through the whole writings of William Shakespeare, we understand that tragedy brings pity and fear, not comedy. About comedy, it is said that in 9 days are wonders. So tragedy creates pity and fear in us. Hence criticism help us in knowing a great treasure of knowledge, like Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj, Saint Kabir, and starter of Sacha Soda, Shyam Ji Maharaj. They appreciated criticisms by their great thoughts and ideas. Nobody can understand their history, chemistry, and mystery of life. So, likely that Shakespeare also emphasized and insisted upon important tragedies of his writings, like Hamlet, The Merchant of Venice, King Lear, Othello, great stories in the series of literature he presented in front of the worldly people. Play after play runs from his pen, mighty dramas of human life and character following one another so rapidly that good work seems impossible. Yet they stand the test of time, and their poetry is still unrivaled in any language, unrivaled, incomparable, matchless, fearless. For all this great work, the author apparently cares little since he makes no attempt to collect or preserve his writings. A thousand scholars have ever since been busy collecting, identifying, classifying the works, which this magnificent workman tossed aside so carelessly when he abandoned the dramas and retired to his native village. In all his writings, his nativity with holy motherland was really a great blessing and gracious for his career. He had a marvelously imaginative and creative mind, but he invents few, if any, new plots or stories. He simply takes an old play or an old poem, makes it over quickly and low. This old familiar material glows with the deepest thoughts and the tenderest feelings that enable our humanity, and each new generation of man finds it more wonderful than the last. How did he do it? That is still an unanswered question and the source of our wonder. There are, in general, two theories to account for Shakespeare. The Romantic school of writers have always held that in him all came from within, that his genius was his sufficient guide, and that to the overpowered, and that to the overmastering power of his genius alone, he owed all his great works. Practical, unimaginative man, on the other hand, assert that in Shakespeare all came from without, and that we must study his environment rather than his genius. If we are to understand him, he lived in a play loving age. He studied the crowds, gave them what they wanted, and simply reflected their own thoughts and feelings. In reflecting the English crowd about him, he unconsciously reflected on crowds which are alike in all ages. Hence his continued popularity and in being guided by public sentiment, he was not singular but followed the planned paths that every good dramatist has always followed to success. Probably the truth of the matter is to be found somewhere between these two extremes. Of his great genius, there can be no question. There are other things to consider. As we have already noticed, Shakespeare was trained like his fellow workmen, first as an actor, second as a reviser of old plays, and last as an independent dramatist. He worked with other playwrights and learned their secret. Like them, he studied and followed the public taste, and his work indicates at least three stages. From his first somewhat crude experiments to his finished masterpieces, so it would seem that in Shakespeare we have the result of hard work and of orderly human development quite as much as of transcendent genius. When we focus on his life, he born in 1564 and died in 1616. Two outward influences were powerful, developing the genius of Shakespeare. The little village of Stratford, center of the most beautiful and romantic district in rural England, and the great city of London, the center of the world's political activity. In one, he learned to know the natural man in his natural environment. In the other, the social, the artificial man in the most unnatural of surroundings. From the register of the little parish church at Stratford on Avon, we learn that William Shakespeare was baptized there on the 26th of April 1564 Old Style, and it was customary to baptize children on the third day after birth. The 23rd of April, May 3, according to our Indian calendar, is generally accepted as the poet's birthday. His father, John Shakespeare, was a farmer's son from the neighboring village of Snitterfield who came to Stratford about 1551 and began to prosper as a trader in corn, wheat, leather, and other agricultural products. His mother, Mary Arden, was the daughter of a prosperous farmer, descended from an old Warwickshire family of mixed Anglo-Saxon and Norman blood. In 1559, the married couple sold a piece of land, and the document is signed. The mark plus of John Shakespeare, the mark plus of Mary Shakespeare, and from this it has been generally inferred that by the vast majority of their countrymen. Neither of the poet's parents could read or write. This was probably true of his mother, but the evidence from Stratford documents now indicates that his father could write and that he also audited the town accounts. Though in attesting documents he sometimes made a mark, leaving his name to be filled in by the one who drew up the document. Of Shakespeare's education we know little, except that for a few years he probably attended the Andor Grammar School at Stratford, where he picked up small Latin and less Greek, to which his learned friend Ben Jonson refers. His real teachers, meanwhile, were the men and women and the natural influences which surrounded him. Stratford is a charming little village in beautiful Warwickshire and near at hand were the forest of Arden, the old castles of Warwickshire and Kenilworth, and the old Roman campus and military roads. To appeal powerfully to the boy's lively imagination, every phase of the natural beauty of this exquisite region is reflected in Shakespeare's poetry. Just as his characters reflect the nobility and the littleness, the gossip, vices, emotions, prejudices, and traditions of the people about him. Such passages suggest not only genius but also a keen, sympathetic observer, whose eyes see every significant detail. So with this nurse in Romeo and Juliet, whose endless worship and vulgarity cannot quite hide a kind heart. She is simply the reflection of some forgotten nurse with whom Shakespeare had talked by the wayside, not only the worship but also the dreams, the unconscious poetry that sleeps in the heart of the common people, appeal tremendously of appeal tremendously to Shakespeare. Shakespeare's imagination and are reflected in his greatest plays. Othello tries to tell the curt soldier the story of his love, but the account is like a bit of Mandeville's famous travels, beaming with the fancies that filled men's heads when the great known world was first brought to their attention by daring explorers. Here is a bit of folklore touched by Shakespeare's exquisite fancy, which shows what one boy listened to before the fire at Halloween. So, with Shakespeare's education at the hands of nature, which came from keeping his heart as well as his eyes wide open to the beauty of the world. He speaks of a horse and he speaks of a horse and we know the fine points of a thoroughbred. He mentions the Duke's wounds and we hear them clamoring on a box chair, their voices smashed like bells in the frosty air. He stops for an instant in the sweep of a tragedy to note a flower, a star, a moonlit bank, a hilltop touched by the sunrise, and instantly we know what our own hearts felt but could not quite express when we saw the same thing. Because he notes and remembers every significant thing in the changing panorama of earth and sky. No other writer has ever approached him in the perfect natural setting of his character. When Shakespeare was about 14 years old, his father lost his little property and fell into debt, and the boy probably left school to henceforth the family of younger children. What occupation he followed for the next 8 years is a matter of conjecture. From evidence found in his place, it is alleged with some show of authority that he was a country schoolmaster and lawyer's clerk, the character of Polo, furnished in love's labors lost, being the warrant for one and Shakespeare's knowledge of law terms for the other. But if we take such evidence, then Shakespeare must have been a botanist because of his knowledge of wild flowers, a sailor because he knows the ropes, a courtier because of his extraordinary facility in cubes and compliments and courtly language, a clown because none other is so dull and foolish, a king because Richard and Henry are true to life, a woman because he was sounded the depths of woman's feelings, and surely a Roman because in Coriolanus and Julius Caesar he was shown as the Roman spirit better than as the Roman writers themselves. He was everything in his imagination, and it is impossible from a study of his scenes and characters to form a definite opinion as to his early occupation. In 1582, Shakespeare was married to Anne Hathaway, the daughter of a peasant family of Shorterry, who was 8 years older than her boy husband. From numerous sarcastic references to marriage made by the factors in his place, and from the fact that he was left his wife and family and went to London. It is generally alleged that the marriage was a hasty and unhappy one. But here again, the evidence is entirely untrustworthy. In many miracles, as well as in later plays, it was customary to depict the seamy side of domestic life for the amusement of the crowd. And Shakespeare may have followed the public taste in this as he did in other things. The references to love and home and quick joys in Shakespeare's plays, or quiet joys in Shakespeare's plays are enough. We take such evidence to establish firmly the opposite supposition that his love was a very happy one. And the fact of that after his enormous success in London, he retired to Stratford to live quietly with his wife and daughter, tends to the same conclusion. About the year 1587, Shakespeare left his family and went to London and joined himself to Burbage's company of players. The persistent tradition says that he had incurred the anger of Sir Thomas Lucy first by watching there in that nobleman's part, and then when hailed before a magistrate by writing studious ballad about Sir Thomas, which show aroused the old gentleman's ire that Shakespeare was obliged to flee the country. An old record says that the poet was much given to all unluckiness in stealing venison and rabbits. The unluckiness probably consisting in getting caught himself and not in any lack of luck in catching the rabbits. The ridicule heaped upon the Lucy family and record and the merry wives of Winchester give some weight to this tradition. Nicholas Rowe, who polished the first life of Shakespeare, is the authority for this story. But there is some reason to doubt whether, at the time when Shakespeare is said to have watched in the beer part of Sir Thomas Lucy at Charles Court, there were many beer or park at the place referred to. The subject is worthy of some scant attention, if only to show how worthless is the attempt to construct out of humor a story of a great life which fortunately perhaps had no contemporary biographers. Of his life in London from 1587 to 1611, the period of his greatest literary activity, we know nothing definitely. We can judge only from his plays, and from these it is evident that he entered into the stirring life of England's capital with the same perfect sympathy and understanding that marked him among the plain people of his native Warwickshire. The first authentic reference to him is in 1592 when Green's bitter attack appeared, showing plainly that Shakespeare had in 5 years assumed an important position among playwrights. Then appeared the apology of the publishers of Green's pamphlet, with their tribute to the poet's sterling character and occasional literary references, which show that he was known among his fellows as the gentle Shakespeare. Ben Jonson says of him, I love the man and do honor his memory. On this side, idolatry as much as any, he was indeed honest and open and free nature. To judge from only three of his earliest plays, it would seem reasonably evident that in the first 5 years of his London life, he had gained entrance to the society of gentlemen and scholars, had got their practicing mannerisms and expressions, and so was ready by knowledge and observation, as well as by genius, to weave into his dramas the whole stirring life of the English people. The plays themselves, with the testimony of contemporaries and its business success, are strong evidence against the tradition that his life in London was wild and dissolute, like that of the typical actor and playwright of his time. Shakespeare's first work may well have been that of a general helper, an odd joke man about the theatre, but he soon became an actor, and the records of the old London theatres show that in the next 10 years he gained a prominent place, though there is little reason to believe that he was counted among the stars. Within 2 years he was at work on plays, and his post here was exactly like that of other playwrights of his time. He worked with other men and he revised old plays before writing his own, and so gained a practical knowledge of his art. Henry VI is an example of this tinkering work, in which, however, his native power is unmistakably manifest. The three works of Henry VI are a succession of scenes from English chronicle history strung together very loosely, and only in the last is there any definite attempt at unity. That he soon fell under Marlowe's influence is evident from the atrocities and bombast of Titus Andronicus and Richard C. Farmer may have been written by both playwrights in collaboration, or maybe one of Marlowe's heroes. Marlowe's horrors left unfinished by his early death and brought to an end by Shakespeare. He soon broke away from this apprentice work and then appeared in rapid succession Love's Labour's Lost, Comedy of Errors, Two Gentlemen of Verona, first English chronicle plays, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Romeo and Juliet, this order is more or less conjectural, but the wide variety of these plays, as well as their unevenness and frequent probabilities, marks the first or experimental stage of Shakespeare's work. It is as if the author were trying his power, or more likely trying the temper of his audience, for it must be remembered that to please his audience was probably the ruling motive of Shakespeare as of the other early dramatists. During the most vigorous and prolific period of his career, Shakespeare's poem, rather than his dramatic work, marked the beginning of his success. Venus and Adonis became immensely popular in London, and its dedication to the Earl of Southampton brought, according to tradition, a substantial money gift which may have laid the foundation for Shakespeare's business success. He appears to have shrewdly invested his money and soon became part owner of the Globe and Blackfriars theatres, in which his plays were presented by his own companies. Its success and popularity grew amazingly. Within a decade of his unnoticed arrival in London, he was one of the most famous actors and literary men in England. Following his experimental work, there came a succession of wonderful plays: Merchant of Venice, As You Like It, Twelfth Night, Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, King Lear, Antony and Cleopatra. The great tragedies of this period are associated with a period of gloom and sorrow in the poet's life, but of its cause we have no knowledge. It, it may have been this unknown sorrow which turned his thoughts back to Stratford and caused apparently a dissatisfaction with his work and profession, but the data is generally attributed to other causes. Actors and playwrights were in this day generally looked upon with suspicion or contempt, and Shakespeare, in the midst of success, seems to have looked forward to the time when he could retire to Stratford to live the life of a farmer and country gentleman. His own and his father's families were first released from that. Then in 1597, he bought New Place, the finest house in Stratford, and soon added a tract of farming land to complete his estate. His profession may have prevented his acquiring the title of gentleman, or he may have only followed a custom of the time when he applied for and obtained a coat of arms for his father, and so indirectly secured the title by inheritance. His home visits grew minor and more frequent till about the year 1611 he left London and retired permanently to Stratford. Though still in the prime of life, Shakespeare soon abandoned his dramatic work for the comfortable life of a continuous man of his later plays, Coriolanus, Cymbeline, Winterstein, and Brides show a decided falling off from his previous work and indicate another period of experimentation, this time not to test it on ours but to catch the fickle humor of the public. As is usually the case with the theatre going people, they soon turn from serious drama to sentimental or more questionable spectacles, and with Fletcher, who worked with Shakespeare and succeeded him as the first playwright of London. The decline of the drama had already begun in 1609. However, occurred an event which gave Shakespeare the chance for a farewell to the public. An English ship disappeared and all on board were given up for lost. A year later, the sailors returned home and their arrival created intense excitement. They had been wrecked on the unknown Bermudas and had lived there for 10 months, terrified by mysterious messages which they thought came from spirits and devilish, from spirits and devils. Five different accounts of his fascinating shipwreck were published, and the Bermudas became known as the Day of Divines. Shakespeare took this story, which caused as much popular interest as the later shipwreck, which gave us Robinson's Cruise, and moved it into Tempest in the same year, 1611. He probably sold his interest in the Globe and Black theaters, and his dramatic work was ended. A few plays were probably left unfinished and were turned over to Fletcher and other dramatists. That Shakespeare thought little of his success and had no idea that his dramas were the latest that were ever produced seems evident from the fact that he made no attempt to collect or publish his works, or even to save his manuscript, which were carelessly left to stage managers of the theatre, and so found their way ultimately to the ragman after a few years of quiet life, of which we have less record than of hundreds of simple inconsequential men of the time. Shakespeare died on the probable anniversary of his birth, April 23, 1616. He was given a tomb in the chancel of the parish church, not because of his preeminence in literature, but because of his interest in the affairs of upper privilege, and in the sad irony of it, the broad stone that covered the tomb, now an object of veneration to the thousands that early visited the little church, was inscribed as follows. This rash dogged over the world's greatest poet was intended, no doubt, as a warning to some stupid sexton that he should empty the grave and give the honored place to some amiable gentleman who had given more details to the parish. Thank you. I think I thank brothers and sisters. I thank all my teacher trainers. I thank all my professor professionals. I thank all my officers. I thank all listeners and learners. I thank all respected doctors and directors. I thank all adorable ministers and managers. I thank all honorable advocates, organizers, administrators, and advisors. Last but not least, I would like to thank the most honorable President Modi. Thank you. Have a nice day. Best to see you.